just going to share some tips with you now that I've learned through the conversations with technical leaders and through my own experience. And I found through those conversations that, interestingly enough, there were some themes that emerged. I've taken what I've learned over the years and insights from the discussions to distill them into this framework for great leadership, which I call the 6 superpowers of great leaders. We've got intention, cognition, simulation, inspiration, conversation, and persuasion. I just want to talk you through the 6 of them now, give you a bit of an understanding as to some of the ways that you can use these superpowers and level up your superpowers to increase your influence and your impact and your income in the workplace. Before we get into those 6, though, there's a foundational element, and that's really a lot to do with your mindset. So remember the discomfort of taking that quick test? Well, look, no assessment tool is perfect. However, even an imperfect tool or even imperfect question should get you thinking. What's the value here that you can take away? There should be something you can learn. And the foundation of great leadership is being open to learning from anyone at any time. And really, you could summarize that as a growth mindset or lifelong learning. It's important to realize that there's a humility there, but there's also a great confidence, because if you're confident in what you know and you're open to learning from anyone at any time, you know that you can take that information, assimilate the bits that resonate for you, and really question the bits and find a way of making that yours. The second really important mindset as a foundation is to lean into the uncomfortable. So if that was an uncomfortable process, or going and talking to people is an uncomfortable process, or having a difficult conversation is uncomfortable, it's being able to lean into that. And it's a lesson I hear again and again when I talk to great technical leaders. It just expands your comfort zone, and therefore you become much more comfortable doing lots of different things, and that gives you more capability. And thirdly, the next important foundational mindset is that useful is more important than being correct. So this comes up in a whole range of different scenarios. But if somebody's talking to you and you know they're not correct, rather than spending 3 minutes going down a bit of a tangent to correct them and let them know that they were wrong, you need to first check in with yourself and say, is that the most useful thing I could be doing at this point in time? And it's the same with things that you're trying to say and how people perceive you. Is if you think they're getting off tangent or they've made the wrong assessment, again, ask yourself, is it important to correct them, or what's useful here? What's most useful right now in this moment and going forwards? If you apply that mindset over and over again in different situations, you actually find that you spend less time arguing with people about what's correct and just more time moving forwards together constructively. All right, superpower number 1, simulation. So the problems here is that people often make the same mistakes over and over again. Personal growth seems really slow, and it's really hard to work around complex problems, especially in the interpersonal space. Some of the foundational thinking here is that personal growth takes time, but I want to tell you it doesn't take time. Personal growth takes insight, and if you can have more insights in a shorter amount of time, you're going to grow faster. The best way to do this is through personal reflection. So if you can start a personal reflection process, you could think of it like a mini agile retro. What went really well today? What didn't go so well today? And how can I make it better going forwards? That actually leads to self-awareness, and that self-awareness then eventually leads to embedding of new habits. And thirdly, that takes us to the idea that keeping a journal is cool. So I never used to think that keeping a journal was something that a grown adult should be doing. But I've learned over the years that it's just such a powerful tool for dissecting what's going on for me in my world, reflecting on what happened, how I could do it differently, what I could learn from it, what I did really, really well that I want to remember to do again in future. Moving on to superpower number 2, which is cognition. So this superpower directly relates to the rationale element of influence. And I guess it comes from this assumption that humans are really logical, when in reality, humans are imperfect thinking machines. And this is to do with a number of factors, most prominently the cognitive bias, emotions, and fatigue. But once you're aware of that, the good news is you can use decision frameworks to improve the speed and quality of your decisions. And there's other things you can do to preserve your decision-making capability. I want to point you at this point to Charlie Munger, because he's developed his own system of mental models and frameworks to run decisions through and help mitigate against biases. A fantastic book is called Poor Charlie's Almanac. I'll link to it from the resources page with this video. And he talks about a range of different biases. One of the really interesting ones is when you've got a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And another one that we've talked about already is that confirmation bias. It's such an important one to be aware of. Third superpower is intention. And this relates directly to credibility and trust, because people judge trustworthiness by three things. There's integrity. Do you do what you say you will? There's reliability. Do you behave in predictable ways? And then there's intentions. Are your intentions selfish or are they genuine? Do you have my and others' best interests in mind? And this is where spending some time asking questions and listening to your stakeholder talk about their problems is really, really important. But it's also important to be clear on your intentions going in. And if you find that your intentions are selfish, then you need to think again. You need to find what are their intentions, what's a bigger intention that I can link to, and you have to be genuine about that. If you're not genuine about it, people can see through those unauthentic intentions, and they'll see through that using your language and your actions, and you'll burn your credibility big time if you're not being genuine. But if you spend that time asking questions, listening to your stakeholder talk about their problems and what they're trying to achieve, and incorporating that into your plans, then you're going to find that they really trust you. They trust that you've got their best intentions at heart. And this is also where talking about the customer needs and the customer outcomes scores you big points. Any higher purpose other than your own goals will score well here. Fourthly, we've got inspiration. So great leaders inspire those around them every day, but not through feats of stunning intellect or rousing pep talks, but through their presence and attitude alone. What we find is it's really hard to motivate and energize and sustain yourself and others over time, and it's hard to inspire others to keep fighting the good fight in the face of constant resistance and hurdles. But you can be that source of inspiration. It's really about your energy and how you work with others. So you got to keep your energy levels up. You need to look after yourself and your health first, which means getting a good night's sleep. It means drinking water. It means eating good, nutritious, healthy food. And it means getting exercise. It's really important. There's also lots of great research that's been done by Sean Acor. You can read about it in The Happiness Advantage. And interestingly, he found in the workplace that success doesn't lead to happiness. However, happiness leads to success. So there's always a place for realistic assessment of situations. We don't want to be caught in a situation where we're always looking through rose-colored glasses and therefore biasing our own decisions. However, in general, if you can be positive and help others to be positive in the workplace, you'll sustain your energy and the energy of others better over time and be more successful on the whole. So you look for those silver linings. There's always an opportunity in a crisis, and you have to remind people to keep looking for the positives and working towards them. It's also really important to understand what motivates people and how to motivate them, which are subtly different concepts. And there's two resources I'll point you to respectively. The first one is called Drive by Dan Pink. And in his book, he talks about how people are motivated by either autonomy, mastery, or purpose. But also check out Gung Ho by Ken Blanchard. And in that book, he talks about how to really put this into practice within a team or when leading a movement. Now, the fifth superpower is conversation, and this relates directly to clarity. A common complaint of digital leaders is we give way too much detail and expect the listener to do the same analysis that we did to reach the same conclusion. And it's not their job to do the analysis. That's why they pay us. We're looking for Goldilocks communication here. Not too little, not too much, just right. We need to think about the UX of that conversation. What is the listener trying to achieve? What do they need to know right now? And a great way to start is called chunking. And this is about splitting your on-the-spot responses into 3 or 4 chunks so that they're easily digestible. And you'll notice that throughout this presentation. A lot of what I want to talk to you about is broken down into 3 or 4 chunks just to keep it comprehensible and digestible. You can even start by saying, I think there are 3 things we need to consider, X, Y, and Z. Which would you like to know more about now? And give the listener the opportunity to pull information from you that they need rather than overloading them. The final superpower here is persuasion. This really brings all the other superpowers together to create really powerful influence, persuading people of your ideas. First, we need to understand that persuasion isn't a fight. It's a dance. And that means the harder you push, the more they're going to push back. You need to lead them gently around to your way of thinking, even if that means they think that they're leading. Because what does that really hurt? At the end of the day, you've still influenced, you've still got to where you needed to be. Again, it comes back to saying, well, look, I could correct them and let them know that it was my idea and I was leading them. But is that really most useful? Because again, people like information, but they don't like to be told. So they're just going to resist that. But you also need to be open to them leading and bringing their valid perspective to the mix. And you're going to come up with better decisions and outcomes as a result. So sometimes the best leader is a good follower. Secondly, we have to understand that emotion is more powerful than logic. You can't fight emotion with logic. That only escalates people's bad feelings and their ill will towards you. It also means that you need to address emotions first, which could be just building rapport first before starting a conversation about anything, checking in with the other person. Are they okay? If nothing else, this makes them aware of the bad state that they're in and the filter and the bias that they're bringing to the conversation from the start, so they can mitigate against that themselves. But we also need to be aware that emotions will come up during the logical discussion, and you can try to predict those if you can and be ready for them. But if nothing else, be mindful of how the other person is reacting. And if emotions have been triggered, in which case, abandon the logic. You actually have to deal with those emotions first. Emotions are always going to win, and they need to now be addressed. And that can often just be as simple as making the other person feel heard. So you can start by saying to them, look, I get a sense that you might be frustrated at the moment, or I get a sense that this may be something that you're finding difficult or you're finding upsetting. But also that gives them an opportunity to tell you about what they are feeling and what they are thinking, and listening to that and acknowledging and just saying, look, I understand the way that you're feeling, or I can see why you would feel that, makes them feel heard and gives them the sense that their emotions are legitimate. And people need that for them to then be able to let go. Once you can see those emotions subside, you can sort of return to the logical argument. So it's not always quite that simple, but that's all we're going to have time for today.